welcome back to our sensory journaling activities. All right, for this activity, the goal that I have for you is that we're going to deepen your intellectual engagement with the course concepts for this sensation and perception class. And we're going to do it in a few ways. So we'll reflect on some of the ways that perception may differ from objective reality. We're going to make connections from the biological and psychological concepts that we've been talking about to broader philosophical questions and ideas. And we'll read a little bit of ancient Greek philosophy just for fun. So, all right, what I have for you this time is that if you haven't already done so, take a little time to read the excerpt from Plato's Republic that I have posted on Canvas. So for this, it's a lengthy document that I've given you on Canvas, but you can, for this assignment, focus on the first 5 pages of that excerpt, which are the most relevant. So if you haven't done that yet, go ahead and pause the video, and you can come back afterward. Okay. So, now that you've done that, it's one thing to read it, to yourself quietly. What I'd like to do next is to actually read aloud a few portions of this text. Just to set a good example for you, I went to the library, and there's a whole shelf of these. Can you read that? No, you probably can't read that label, but it's JC71.P35. There's a whole shelf full of different editions of Plato's Republic. So, go check it out. All right. We're in Book 7. So here's what we're going to do. I mentioned in a previous video that there's a kind of contemplative exercise that Ignatius referred to as application of the senses. We're going to use this as a method to help us really get into this text for a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read some quotes out of here and ask you to really try and just sit there, center yourself, and try to use your imagination to put yourself into this scene. Okay? All right. So, here we go. Picture men in an underground cave dwelling with a long entrance reaching up towards the light along the whole width of the cave. All right, so I want you to try to picture this in your mind. Close your eyes. There's a cave, and there's people in this cave. They're kind of underground, and there's a long entrance to the cave. Picture what that would look like. In this, they lie from their childhood, their legs and necks in chains, so that they stay where they are and look only in front of them as the chain prevents their turning their heads around. Okay. So I want you to try to feel what this would feel like. We did a little bit of exercise with imagination last time of feeling what something would feel like. Try to imagine yourself in this cave, that you're one of the people in the cave. And you've got these chains that are on your legs and on your neck, so you can't turn your head around. You can only look at this wall that's in front of you. Some way off and higher up, a fire is burning behind them, and between the fire and the prisoners is a road on higher ground. Okay. So, from your perspective, you're sitting in this cave. You're chained up. Your neck is held. Your legs are held by chains. You can only look ahead of you where there's just a wall. But somewhere above and behind you, there's a fire. Imagine there's some smell of like smoke coming from this fire, right? So you've got the feeling of the chains on your neck. You've got the feeling of like the cold rock of the cave. You're sitting there. It's mostly dark, okay? But you're kind of aware there's a fire burning. You can smell it. Maybe you can hear the crackling of the fire a little bit. All right. And if you take sort of go out of your body for a second and sort of take a third-person perspective, what it's describing is that there's going to be a wall in between the fire and the wall that you're looking at. Okay. Imagine a wall built along this road, like the screen which showmen have in front of the audience, over which they show the puppets. So if you've never seen a puppet theater, but you can kind of imagine, there's a wall, and then there's some people like holding things up over the wall that could be like puppets. All right. Glaucon says, I have it. Picture also men carrying along this wall all kinds of articles which overtop it, statues of men and other creatures in stone and wood and other materials. Naturally, some of the carriers are speaking and others are silent. So from a third-person perspective now, picture this overall scene where there's a wall and there's people going along behind this wall, and they're holding these things up over the top of the wall. Okay. And sometimes they're talking, sometimes not. And then putting yourself back in the perspective of the prisoner, you're sitting there, your neck is chained, your legs are chained. You can kind of smell that there's this fire, but you don't really know anything about this wall and the people walking around, right? All you know is that you're down in this dark, kind of cold dungeon cave, and you can just look straight ahead. Okay. Do you think that such men would have seen anything of themselves or of each other except the shadows thrown by the fire on the wall of the cave opposite to them? Let's try to picture what this would be like as a prisoner. From the point of view of one of the prisoners in the cave, you're forced to just look straight ahead. You can't even really look at the people on either side of you. The only thing you see ahead of you is where the fire back up behind you is casting light onto the wall in front of you. And there's shadows there because of the stuff that people are carrying back and forth in between the fire and the wall. And of course, you don't know anything about those people, right? As a prisoner, you don't know what they're doing, but what you see in front of you are these shadows going back and forth. What would they have seen of the things carried along the wall? Would it not be the same? Surely, right? So the only thing that you know as one of these prisoners is the shadows on the wall in front of you. If they were able to talk with one another, do you not think that they would suppose that what they saw to be the real things? As one of these people in the cave, you're looking at the projected shadows, and that's all you know to exist. So instead of understanding that there's people behind you and above you carrying things along a wall, actually the only thing you understand to exist is this shadow in front of you. Try to imagine what that would be like, to be the person who's just seeing these shadows. If there were in their prison an echo from the opposite wall, when any of one of those passing by spoke, do you imagine that they could help thinking that the voice came from the shadow passing before them? Try to imagine what that would be, how that would feel like, right, as one of the prisoners. Again, going through the different senses that you have. The sense of sitting there in the dark, you're chained there, you have to look straight ahead. all you can really see are some shadows on this wall in front of you. And then when you hear the people talking, you don't know where the sound is coming from. It sounds like it's coming from the shadows themselves. So the shadows are like the objects to you in your world. Most assuredly, I said, the only truth that such men would conceive would be the shadows of those manufactured articles. All right, sit and reflect on this for a minute. Now it gets kind of interesting. You can kind of enact this in your mind. Let us suppose one of them is released and forced suddenly to stand up and turn his head, walk towards the light. What would that feel like? Let us suppose that all these actions gave him pain and that he was too dazed to see the objects whose shadows he had been watching before. What do you think he would say if he were told by someone that before he had been seeing mere foolish phantoms, while now he was nearer to being and was turned to what in a higher degree is, and was looking more directly at it? Do you not think that he would be perplexed, and imagine that the things he had seen before were truer than those now pointed out to him? Put yourself in the position of the prisoner who's just been freed, and they're dragging you up out of this cave and into the light. Oh, and the light is hurting your eyes. Oh, and you're trying to shield your eyes from it, and you're so sore from having been chained up all that time. Think about what this is like. You would want to go back. If you were forced to look at the light itself, would not his eyes ache? Would he not try to escape and turn back to the things which he could look at and think that they were really more distinct than the things shown him? But if someone were to drag him up the steep and rugged ascent, and did not let go till he'd been dragged up to the light of the sun, would not his forced journey be one of pain and annoyance? Imagine the pain and annoyance that you're feeling as they're dragging you up to the light. And when he came to the light, would not his eyes be so full of the glare that he would not be able to see a single one of the objects we now call true? Last of all, I fancy he would be able to look at the sun and observe its nature, not its appearances in water on alien material, but the very sun itself in its own place, right? So after a while, the eyes are adjusted. I'm skipping forward a little bit. All that done, he would come to infer concerning it that it's the sun which produces the seasons and the years and controls everything in the sphere of the visible, etc. So, imagine yourself this prisoner who's been freed. You're out in the light for some period of time. Eventually, you've adjusted to it. You see a completely different scene than what you had seen before. If he is reminded of his original abode and its wisdom, and those who were then his fellow prisoners, do you not think he will pity them and count himself happy in the change? Think of what that would feel like. Moving forward a little bit, if this man were to descend again and take his seat in his old place, would not his eyes be full of darkness because he had just come out of the sunlight? Imagine what it would be like to be dragged back down into the cave. Take a minute. Really, it would be great if you really take a minute to really think about this. Dragging back down into the cave. Would not men laugh at him and say that having gone up above, he had come back with his sight ruined? Do you not think that they would kill him who tried to release them and bear them up if they could lay hands on him? Think of how the person who had been freed and then gone back into the cave would be thought insane by all the people who were there. What that would be like. All right, I hope that you've enjoyed that visualization. Here's what I'd like you to do for the journaling part. In your journal, okay, we're going to do a couple things. In your journal, draw a diagram of the cave. All right, so what I'd like for you to do, open it up on one of your pages here. Just draw out a little diagram. I'm not looking for great artwork or artistic skill here, but I want you to have a few different elements. Okay, so the layout, try to incorporate that overall layout that we talked about, right, to your best understanding. Where the people are, okay, these could be stick people, I don't mind. How the light is coming in to cast shadows, okay, and then where there's like the pathway and the wall where the things are passing by and casting the shadows. All right, make sure that we can see where the shadows are in the wall. All right, so just kind of giving an overall diagram of what that setup is. Now, I want you to take a minute and look at the diagram you've drawn and think about if you can make any analogies with this diagram to the sensory systems we've been learning about in our sensation perception class. So, for example, we talked about the physical stimulus and the receptor cells for each of the different senses and the neural signals in the brain, and we've talked about subjective experience. Those are all some different aspects of sensation and perception. Can you map any of those elements onto your cave diagram? There's not just one correct way to do this. Okay, so I just want you to think about what the analogy could be. All right. And then in class, we can hopefully take a little bit of time to talk about how you and your peers might have interpreted it similarly or differently. I'd love it if some people have slightly different takes on that. The goal here is to think about whether this whole metaphor kind of applies to sensation and perception. Okay? I do have a little bit of a writing task for you to do also. Once you've drawn your diagram, also in your journal, write out a little paragraph where I'd like you to think about an experience in your life that you could relate to the experience of the prisoner being released and coming up out from the cave and into the sunlight. Okay, and see if you can make an analogy between what your understanding was of something while you were still the prisoner in the cave and how your concept of that thing changed when you were sort of released from that prison and brought up into the other light, and whether there's any analogies there, whether you experienced the kind of disorientation that the prisoner did. Think if there's something, this could be any kind of experience from your life. It doesn't have to be a sensory thing. It could be any kind of life experience in which you kind of felt like you could make an analogy to this cave and the prisoners. All right, and I would be very interested to read what you have to say. All right, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.